Plasma is, hands down, the most useless element in all of Horizon Forbidden West. Or is it? Now, while I agree that Plasma for the most part can be pretty underwhelming, and it's definitely not the most practical element to use, especially on higher difficulties like Ultra Hard, but I've been playing around with Plasma a lot, and I can confidently say that under the right circumstances, it may be one of the better element types for dealing damage. So let's break down everything you need to know about Plasma. To get started, let's talk about what Plasma is and how to use it. Then I'll break down a few scenarios where Plasma can be really useful and the weapons, coils, and Valor surges needed to make the most of it. And all of the game footage from this video was recorded on very hard difficulty with weapons and coils that you can get in just 1 or 2 playthroughs, so I definitely encourage you to try these tricks and techniques for yourself. Plasma is one of the new element types in Horizon Forbidden West, and for most players, it's probably something that's killed you more than you've used it to kill machines. Oh, and by the way, if you're curious how you can avoid taking damage from a Plasma Blast explosion, I made a video about it, which I'll link in the description below. But similar to other elemental types, Plasma builds up in machines, with smaller machines like Burrowers having the lowest threshold for Plasma buildup, and larger machines like Fireclaws having the highest. But what makes Plasma unique is that once it's built up, the machine will enter the Plasma Blast state, which lasts for 15 seconds. Any damage you do to the machine during that time will start to fill up the damage meter. And once the timer ends, the machine will be hit with a plasma explosion, the size of which depends on how much damage you were able to do during that window. Now in theory, this is an awesome concept. I love the idea of having a window to deal damage, and once that window closes, you get an explosion that's relative to the amount of damage you caused while the window was open. But in practice, this is where Plasma falls flat for most players, myself included, because the size of the Plasma Blast explosion isn't relative to the amount of damage you deal while the machine is in the Plasma Blast state, and can be a little underwhelming. There are basically 2 different levels to the explosion, level 1 and level 2. If you do no damage or a minimum amount of damage to the machine while they're in the Plasma Blast state, you'll get a level 1 explosion, which isn't very much damage at all. 35 damage for small machines, 80 damage for medium machines, and 200 damage for large machines. But if you do enough damage to fill up the meter, you'll get a level 2 explosion, which is an extra 100 damage for small machines, 240 damage for medium machines, and 600 damage for large machines. Now this still isn't all that much, especially on higher difficulties, but it is better than the damage you get from a level 1 explosion. So if you're going to use Plasma at all, it makes sense to at least try to trigger the level 2 explosion. And this brings us to the first scenario where Plasma might be useful, if you're a player that likes to start out a big machine fight with one big hit. Using one of the Plasma Sharpshot bows like the Glow Blast Sharpshot bow or the legendary Forgefall Sharpshot bow, in either a regular or advanced Plasma Precision arrow, you can shoot a machine at distance and quickly put them in the Plasma Blast state. From there, you can switch to your damage weapon like a Spike Thrower or just back to the regular precision arrows on your Sharpshot bow to deal damage. 1 or 2 shots should be enough to fill up the damage meter enough to get the level 2 explosion, and once the Plasma timer goes down, you'll get a nice Plasma Blast at the end. Now, is this any better than just using your Sharpshot bow right from the start and getting in a big hit, and then potentially getting to take advantage of the damage buff you get from being in stealth? Probably not. But there is one other variable that can affect the size of the Plasma Blast explosion and potentially make it worth it, and that's if a machine is weak or very weak to Plasma. If a machine is weak to Plasma, it'll increase the damage from the Plasma Blast by 25% for both level 1 and level 2 explosions. And if a machine is very weak to Plasma, it'll increase the size of the blast by 50%. And the only machine that's very weak to Plasma is the Slitherfang. Plasma can actually be very useful when going up against Slitherfangs because you can get 900 points of damage from a level 2 Plasma Blast explosion. This is the highest single total that I've been able to get from a Plasma Blast explosion, but if you've been able to get higher or you know of someone else that's been able to get higher, definitely be sure to let me know in the comments below. One of the best weapons that I've found to build up plasma on a Slitherfang is the Allmother's Blessing Tripcaster, which is available exclusively in New Game Plus. Personally, I think this is the single best plasma weapon in the entire game, and there's a couple of reasons why it works so well, especially against Slitherfangs. For one, the Slitherfang has more surface area than most machines, so it's more likely to trip the wires. And if you use the quick wire weapon technique, it makes it really easy to lay down a couple of wires quickly. You can also pair this with a weave like the Elite Traps weave, or armor skills like the +2 trap limit skill on the Carja Stalker Elite, which will allow you to place up to 8 tripwires at a time. Next, unlike other plasma ammo types like arrows or even spikes, plasma tripwires deal damage over time. Once the wire is tripped, it'll create what I call a plasma puddle, which certainly sounds gross, but it can be really powerful because it'll continue to deal damage for a few seconds. Not only does this fill up the damage meter, which helps you get to that level 2 explosion limit, but it also continues to deal plasma damage, which again is really powerful against the Slitherfang. And if you use the Plasma Tripcaster on a medium-sized machine, one thing that I like to do is then switch to a regular ropecaster like the Elite Ropecaster and quickly tie down the machine while they're still in the plasma puddle. Now because the machine is taking damage, the tie down state won't typically last very long, but it usually doesn't matter because the machine is taking so much damage from the plasma puddle and the damage meter is getting filled up, which is going to give us that level 2 explosion to finish him off. It's a little dark, but it can be a fun way to switch it up. And speaking of the Elite Ropecaster, it also comes with plasma ropes, but honestly, I have yet to find a practical or even novelty use for these. They're not any good at tying down machines, and they're not any good at building up or dealing plasma damage. Another great way to use plasma is with a spike thrower like the Glow Blast spike thrower that you can get with hunting tokens for completing hunting ground challenges, or the Last Argument spike thrower, which you can get by completing the Friend of the Dark side mission in the Burning Shores. The Last Argument is probably the best spike thrower in the entire game. It's great not only at dealing explosive damage, but it's also really good for building up and dealing plasma damage. I like to pair it with the Spike Trap weapon technique, especially when going up against Slitherfangs, because you'll end up getting higher overall damage than you would if you were using explosive spikes. And if you're going up against a group of machines and want to inflict plasma quickly, a good option is the Elite Canister Ropecaster. Unlike some of the other elemental types like Acid, Shock, or Purge Water, there are no plasma traps, so this is a really good option if you prefer more of a trapper playstyle. I like to shoot a plasma canister right in the middle of a group and hit it using my plasma sharpshot bow. Depending on the size of the machine, it could take them all out by the blast itself, but at the very least, it should do quite a bit of plasma buildup. Now as far as plasma coils, there are really only a couple of options. My standard coil loadout for legendary plasma weapons with 5 coil slots is the Elite Plasma Coil that you can get in the Burning Shores, which is definitely the best plasma coil available, and then 2 15% plasma coils that you can get in Thornmarsh, and 2 12% plasma and shock coils that you can buy in the Bulwark. And this is another one of the ways that I think plasma could be really improved, if there was a greater variety of coils to use. For example, there are no green or blue coils that could potentially be used earlier in the game. Having green or blue coils available to players earlier in the game, not to mention better early game plasma weapons, would probably encourage more people to use it, and would also potentially just be more beneficial because machine health is still relatively low at this point in the game. And it would be awesome if there was some way you could increase the size of a plasma blast explosion through coils. Something like a +10 or +15% plasma blast increase coil. Now let's talk about the best Valor Surges to complement plasma, because if you're gonna use plasma, a good Valor Surge is a must-have. The Trap Specialist Valor Surge is not a Valor Surge I use very often, but I really like it with plasma because of how it complements the Allmother's Blessing Tripcaster and the Spike Trap weapon technique. The Trap Specialist increases tripwire damage by 100% and tripwire elemental buildup by 75%. This again makes for a very effective strategy when going up against a Slitherfang. Using the Trap Specialist Valor Surge and the Last Argument Spike Thrower, I was recently able to kill a Slitherfang in under 1 minute. If you're interested, I posted a YouTube short about it, which I'll link in the description. There's also the Chained Burst Valor Surge, which is my go-to Valor Surge anytime I'm dealing with a group of machines. The Chain Burst Valor Surge works particularly well with plasma because not only will it inflict plasma on the group, but it'll also deal damage to all the machines within range, which will fill up their plasma damage meters. But also having a Valor Surge that directly affected plasma would be really nice. Maybe something like a Berserk Blast but for plasma. where machines would automatically be put into the plasma blast state and damage would be increased during the plasma blast window. Now I could see this potentially being a little too OP, but it would be a very effective way to deal with groups of machines, especially on higher difficulties. And if you have any other ideas for how to make plasma better in future games, definitely be sure to let me know in the comments below. So is plasma now the best element to use in Horizon Forbidden West? Probably not, but is it at least useful in some situations? Absolutely. And if you found this video useful, be sure to give it a like and make sure to subscribe for even more Horizon Forbidden West content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.